Poke the Bear is brought to you by PrizePicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 351, part of the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where we have pretty much daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season, so follow along over at YouTube. If you don't like YouTube, you don't want to see my face, I get it. You can also subscribe and follow along over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. The show is also brought to you by PrizePicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
How we doing?
Let me tell you, Ty, there's not a whole lot to talk about right now. The offseason is pretty much over, and now we are just biding time until we get to training camp in pretty much the middle of September at this point. So not much to talk about, really, honestly. We're scrapping the bottom of the barrel, I think, right now in terms of finding stuff to talk about a team that pretty much did all of their moves within the first day or two of July.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, you look at the roster, there's some room for maneuvering, sure, but you kind of have a rough idea, as to what it's going to look like, who's going to be in, who's going to be out. A lot of things can change, obviously, as we both know, but, you kind of feel like you know 26 contenders, right? It's how you get down to like 2021. That is going to be what we see kind of transpire here. But, it is very boring. I mean, listen, man, I'm writing about NHL Network rankings as if I suddenly care about them. No disrespect to Tony Luffman and the gang at NHL Network, but like, I've never been like, what's their rankings of wingers? But that's kind of where we are right now in the NHL offseason. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's dour. So I thought in terms of finding stuff to talk about, let's make today's episode one big project and look at projecting the Bruins lineup to start the season. I think when you got so many different moving parts, so many guys that are on the roster bubble, guys that we don't really know what to expect from them, I feel like whatever we both give as our projections might be horrifically wrong once we get to October 8th against the Capitals. But I do feel like there is a lot of variance or a lot of decisions that have yet to been made about that roster and what it's going to look like. So I think we just go line by line, go through the forwards, defense, and the goaltending, which is also pretty interesting. So starting off with the first line, do you want to go first with what your projection is, or how do you want to do it?
I feel like this is the one we might agree on.
I feel like it, yeah. So what's yours?
Mine is Morgan Geekie, Elias Lindholm, and David Pastrnak.
Same. Look at that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you want to be a one-line team, or you don't want to be, but this line was just so good to end the year, right? And I know low stakes. You were playing up the string, but I thought their results were really encouraging enough to make me want to kind of dig deeper and see what you have there. And we've talked about it on this podcast a lot. Elias Lindholm, if he has to be a David Pastrnak embed to get something out of him, I'm okay with that because you're paying him a whole lot of money. So if he can produce, because of Pastrnak and Geekie, but still do the little things that you like about him, the face-offs, the defensive acumen, all that, like, I'm okay with that. So that's kind of, I think, where the best spot is for him to succeed for the 25-26 Boston Bruins.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if what you saw from them at the end of this past year, because like their numbers weren't just like good, they were like a 5-on-5 buzzsaw, right? It was like 16-5 or something was the goals. It was something like that it looked like prime Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but in terms of like when you look at the natural stat trick and you're like, oh Jesus, like the numbers were staggering in favor of the Bruins. So not a guarantee that's going to be the case this year. Not a guarantee that Morgan Geekie's a 33 goal scorer. But I think when you are the Bruins, and if we're looking ahead at what this season is going to be and what positives can be drawn out of it, or how this team could be maybe more competitive than we think, I think a lot of it has to rest on that top line. I think we all know David Pastrnak is going to be productive, but if Morgan Geekie can be a consistent 25-30 goal scorer, and if Elias Lindholm, even if he's riding shotgun, can be like a 60-65 point guy while playing really good defense as well, then you got something there. Doesn't mean the Bruins are back, but if you're trying to find the pieces in place, that's very encouraging for what this team's going to be moving forward.
Yeah, and I think as the contract ages, we've talked about this too, like as the contract ages, you probably don't want Morgan Geekie being a top line player for your team. But right now, he's a top liner until proven otherwise. And so I don't want to punish him because you're weak below the first line, And so at a certain point, I do want to see if he can drive his own line, given the way that he can skate, the way he can shoot. Like, I think he can do that. It's just right now, this is the best spot for him. It really is. It works for everybody. And I think he's owed the opportunity to prove that he is a perennial 30-goal scorer. And I think that's a great spot, offensive usage-wise. Like, that's where you want to be, for sure. So that's why I'm keeping that line together on top of everything else that we've both discussed so far.
Yeah. And now going on to the second line, I'm curious to see what your grouping is. Mine is Zacha, Casey Middlestat, and Victor Arvidsson.
Yeah, so this one's tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that is the natural line to sort of go with. I worry, though. I worry that line might be a little too periphery.
Not good.
Not good. Yeah. At the same time, though, right? Like, you kind of look at what you did with Middlestat last year, playing with Lettieri and Cole Koepke, and you kind of go, I didn't really learn a lot about Casey Middlestat last year, and so there's that part of it. I do want to go with this line, but for the sake of an interesting podcast and the sake of disagreeing here, I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm going to say Matej Blumel, Pavel Zacha, Victor Arvidsson. That's what I'm going to say. Matej Blumel, I'm actually working on a story on him right now. I talked with him the other day. Really has jumped into analytics, right? And he's jumped into getting off one-timers. He's jumped into the idea of the best shooting angles and how to best utilize his shot. It worked out last year in Texas for the Stars. And I think giving him Pavel Zacha and putting Pavel Zacha back in the middle, I kind of like that idea, right? And so I want to see if a guy who scored, 73 points, whatever it was in the AHL a year ago, can be a legit top sixer. And I feel like that's a good spot to put him in. You give him a countryman in Zacha, you give him a veteran pass-first kind of guy in Arvidsson, and your job is bombs away, baby. So I kind of want to see that. I worry with Zacha, Middlestat, and Arvidsson that you have three guys that are going to defer a little bit too much, right? And so I look at Blumel as the shooter on that potential line, and that's where I'm going to go with that for right now. Matej Blumel, second line left wing. Welcome to Boston, baby.
Listen, I like that one. Like, I went with mine because I just feel like it's so tough with like where exactly Middlestat fits in. Because as you said, like, I don't know how much you gleaned from what he did last year when you look at his supporting cast. I wasn't overly knocked over of being like, wow, this guy could be a 55, 60 point guy like last year off of what you saw, which was not a whole lot. But I do like your approach, though, of like, especially this year where there are so much, uncertainty with guys outside of that top line. Now's the time, right, to see if any of these guys can pop, right? Like, and what better way to do that than give a guy like Blumel an elevated role and see if he does well. Maybe he's check Craig Smith and you got like a 20 goal scorer for the next couple of years, or maybe he doesn't pan out. But again, this year where I think you have to leave no stone unturned and kind of throw everything at the wall to find out which guys are going to want to help you this year, but also which guys are going to be part of the solution moving forward, right? It's almost like last year, as terrible as it was, you found out like what you have in Morgan Geekie. And like, yes, maybe he's not a 30 goal guy, but you know what? He's part of the equation, right? And like, you hope that, even if maybe a couple of years from now, he gets bumped down the lineup, he can still pull on the rope and be part of what this next core is going to be. If you're able to do that this year and you find out whether it's Blumel or a younger player or anything like that, I think that'd be a positive out of a year where I feel like you're going to have to focus a little bit maybe more on the silver linings than the tangible results, I think, with the way this season's going.
Yeah, 100%. And that's sort of, that is the line they're going to have to walk here. And the greatest challenge with doing that is what kind of minutes are you giving players to prove themselves that they can sink or swim, right? Like, and we've talked about this ad nauseum here on this podcast, but like, you got to give guys the opportunity to prove they belong. And it's hard to do that if you're a skill guy playing 8 minutes a night. It just is, right? You need offensive zone usage. You need offensive zone deployment. You need to play in the power play a little bit, even if it's second unit. Like, and so the idea that every player has to work their way up from line 4 to line 2, like, or to line 1, like I don't hate it in a vacuum, but you're not that team anymore, right? You're like starved for, when you lift up the big rock and you find some cool bugs underneath it, like that's what you want to do. You're trying to find some cool looking bugs right now. And the Bruins got to do that. They got to lift some rocks here. And you got to do that by giving guys, minutes to actually prove that they can do something besides muck and grind it up and forecheck. Like if you got a skill guy, put him in a skill role. That's a really novel concept, I know, but that's how I look at this upcoming season.
Absolutely. You're hoping that Matej Blumel is the little roly-poly bugs. That's when you hit the jackpot. So you don't want like a centipede or anything like that. That's terrifying.
It's true. No, you don't want that. It's no good.
No, not at all. When you look at the third line, I guess you want to lead us off of what you have your third line, because I think now that we've kind of split a little bit, we're like Vin Diesel and Paul Walker going the different ways. What does your third line look like right now?
Let's hope it doesn't end like that. Jesus.
I hope not.
Yeah, we both got to get in cars after this podcast.
It's true. Yeah, I'll see you over at Gillette.
What the hell, man? I am not going to Gillette tonight. For the record, I am not doing that. No. So my third line is kind of a hodgepodge here. But that's sort of this team, right? Like you're going to have a line that's going to be like that. Right now, I think based on the talk of him and how they view him, given the way they talked about his postseason, I got Matty Poitras centering the third line right now. And I have Casey Mittelstadt on the wing, giving them another face-off option if Poitras cannot win face-offs, although Mittelstadt's not like a world beater. He was actually above 50% in Boston after the deadline a year ago. And then Tanner Jeannot. Now, how you want to dice that all up, who's left, who's right, like, it might just depend on the role, but Jeannot is the space mover or the people mover for Poitras and Mittelstadt to craft their magic there. And so again, it's a bit like line 2, the line 2 that I didn't want to have, where you have two guys that are going to be primarily pass options. But I don't see Fabian Lysell making this roster. I would love it if they did it, but he wasn't mentioned by Don Sweeney, in the press conference, talking about what Marco Sturm can do. I would give every reason. I think there's every reason to play Fabian Lysell here, but I just feel like they're going to go with Matthew Poitras, given the way they raved about his postseason down in Providence, and giving him sort of a clean slate with a new head coach. I think they look at this as a potentially sensitive too strong, but like you don't want to fumble him again, right? And so I feel like there's a degree there. They've already acknowledged fumbling Fabian Lysell, but Matthew Poitras, they haven't, right? And so I feel like there's opportunity there for him to be the third line center, and they're going to try to craft it so that he can win that job out of training camp. Yeah,
I like that grouping too, because I feel like whether it's the second line with like Blumel or like putting like Poitras in that spot with a playmaker like Mittelstadt with the big boy down low, there's like at least upside there. I feel like mine is like very like not getting too flashy, but also like not probably inspiring a lot of excitement as to what the group's going to be. So like mine is Jeannot. I've got Fraser Minton as a 3C, and I've got Blumel as the third line wing there as like the scoring threat. Again, you can make the case that like Blumel is not really suited to like get a good head start with Minton, who's maybe his ceiling isn't as high offensively, at least as Poitras, and Jeannot, who I don't know what exactly you're expecting out of that group, but I do feel like if you're trying to put Minton in a spot where he can succeed, I think 3C is where you want to put him. I think you still have an opportunity to give Blumel some run there. And I feel like when you commit that much money to Jeannot, and I think that third line, however it pans out, that's kind of your sweet spot where there's going to be, I think, younger players, right? Like it's going to be one of Minton or Poitras, and like it could be Blumel, maybe it's Steves, maybe it's Lysell. I think when you look at what Sweeney mentioned about like having a guy that's going to make some space, I think Jeannot is probably more of a third line guy for this team right now than otherwise. But I'm still not like super committed to that grouping that I have, because I also just don't really know where exactly Poitras fits in. Like it's kind of so tough to look at right now before we get to camp, before we see how they do in the preseason, like where the Bruins are envisioning him and whether like Minton's maybe a guy that's better suited for that third line spot.
Yeah, I think that like, Minton is such a wild card here, right? Because we're kind of talking about this team, right? And we're talking about their current center options and who they have there. And whether it's Middlestad, who like Marco Sturm on appearing on Felger Mavs kind of like knocked the idea of Middlestad playing center to like a slight degree, saying like, we'll see what happens. But between Zaka, Lindholm, Kastelik, like you kind of have a sneaky need for a guy who like can bring some two-way pop, right? But also without sacrificing offense entirely. And Fraser Minton like projects to be a guy like that, talking to people in Toronto, they said like, yeah, he's actually probably like projects as like a Charlie Coyle type at the NHL level. And so like, is that his gateway to getting in? Right. And that might come back to like, is he playing PK? Is he like, what is the usage rate? Right. And so like, he really is a really interesting, case study here for the Bruins and training camp. But I just feel like, the Bruins, and this kind of flies in the face of what I'm saying to a certain degree with Matty Poitras, but like when they have options and they're still trying to figure out what you are, they tend to use those options, right? And so like that's kind of where I'm like, I'm wondering if they look at him and go, you know what, we want 30 games of you in Providence before we know like fully what you are and what you can be. And so I like him. It's just, what do they prioritize there, that third line center spot? Given their need for offense, do they double down on, defense first, which would help a guy like Fraser Minton, but like, or do they say, no, we need an offensive minded guy
to find out what we got,
which helps Poitras. It helps Middlestad out of the gate. And then you readjust, in December, right? If things aren't going the way you want them to go.
Yeah. So yeah, it feels like there's a lot up in the air. Like honestly, once you get past that first line, it all kind of goes to hell in terms of what, who are like the leaders in the clubhouse and also just what you want this team to look like. Because I like kind of the way your lineup is set, where there's room, I think, on both the second and third lines for upside. Whereas maybe I'm just so ingrained in like the Bruins and how they've traditionally done things of like, slow and steady defense. We're going to, have Minton there. We're going to do that. We're going to have the veterans up top with Middlestad, give them another look. Like, I think if there's ever time to branch away from that, it's after a catastrophic year and going into a season now where you have a bit of a clean slate. But I don't know what exactly their plan's going to be. But looking at the fourth line, what do you got for your final trio of this forward core?
All right. So for the fourth line here, I have Sean Corrali, Mark Kastelik, and Mikey Eassimon.
Same.
I just feel like you give those guys term, you give them more than league minimum, they're playing, right? And that's, for a guy like Johnny Beecher, I'm coming back to saying, why is he here? And I don't mean that like in a shitty way. I just mean it in a way of like, what's his role, right? Like you're giving term to veteran guys that are going to take his job. And, so what is the plan there for a guy like that? And is he on the outside looking in to begin the season? It does feel that way. So we'll see what happens, but I just think that's probably, you got your two face-off options. One's a lefty, one's a righty. And then you got your pain in the ass. Like that's a Bruins fourth line, in my opinion. That's their fourth line.
Yeah. It's almost like, I agree. Like, I don't really know where Beecher fits in the equation other than like injuries popping up, which feels inevitable with some of those guys and the way they play. Felt bummed out that couldn't get Husandinov in there, but I feel like he's a guy that's also going to get some looks. I just feel like there's some more upside there. Like, it would not surprise me if he's carves out a spot if he has a really strong preseason. Cause like you see the talent. It's a guy that on a team last year where there were so many guys that you're watching a full game tie and you're like, I didn't see one shift that guy did. Like you notice Husandinov when he's moving his feet. So
right.
Felt bad that he didn't make my cut here, but he's kind of, I think, the first guy up 13th forward of what he can bring. Like if guys are lagging a little bit, need some energy, I like what he could bring, but I have the same fourth line as you. Again, I don't think they're going to change the fortunes of this team and what could be kind of a bridge year, but could be kind of a fun fourth line if these guys stay healthy, right? Like I do kind of like the mix you have there. And I think Mikey Eassimon's a fun player in terms of just pain in the ass, puts a lot of pucks on net, mixes things up. Feels like a kind of a good guy to have in the equation here. There's a lot of guys that I don't hate like them on the team. I just wish they didn't like sign so many of them. And also like the term is what the issue is. Like, I think we said this before with like Jeannot. If it was like a 2-year, $1.25 million contract per year thing, I'd be like, yeah, screw it. Yeah, he's going to be fun to watch. Right. Like it's just the conundrum is just the amount of signings and the term. But in terms of like the product on the ice, I don't know if they're going to be winning all these games, but like they're going to be fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, and to your point, like you want to get a guy like Husadinov in there, right? Like you 100% do, but how do you make that happen if the lineup also has Fraser Minton and or Matthew Poitras and or Casey Middlestad and or Matej Blumel? Like you kind of add it all up and you're like, all right, not a lot of space for these guys, especially if they are, similar kind of players, right? And so again, it comes back to sort of what is the idea? What is the idea of this team, right? Like, are they a team that is going to have overwhelming production from their top line again and try to carve out, some dribs and drabs here of other production? Or are they going to say like, nah, we need to have like a beefed up middle six here, right? In terms of offensive power, because we know we're going to have hammers on the fourth line and production at the top line. Like, we got to see how that looks, right? It does feel like they're going to opt for being more, 2-1, 3-2 kind of games. But for a guy like Husadinov and a guy like Lysell, for that matter, like if they are looking for secondary pop, like there's some pretty good options to bring up. It's just do they get the opportunity and how does that all shake out for them?
Yep, absolutely. So a little bit different between our two groupings, but I think I like yours a little bit more in terms of the upside there, especially in that middle six group.
It's the story that you wrote, back when you sat down with Marco Sturm last month. Like, it's a story you wrote of how like they're gonna have to get creative and find ways to squeeze offense out of this lineup, and so you got to give guys some roles and minutes that maybe you're not super comfortable with, but that they have a higher ceiling offensively than guys like Sean Corrali and Tanner Jeannot, who are not bad players. Like, it's not like an indictment against them, but they play a very specific role. And offense is not that primary focus for them, right? And so if you sign those guys, but you deploy them like they're scorers, that's where you run into problems, right? And so for the Bruins, it's about what we're talking about, right? It's about finding ways to deploy guys in seemingly unconventional ways versus their career to date, but you believe in their ceiling and the fact they can rise their ceiling. So there's that part of it as well.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll see what ends up happening once we get to camp. We got to talk about the defense, but before we do that, Ty, let's take a quick break here from our good friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for sure to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Think Shohei will get more than 3 hit points? Maybe Garrett Crochet will get more than 7 strikeouts. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this baseball season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also has a ton of promos, including Flex Friday. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in the lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. Choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup does not win, you get your net losses back in promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. And it's not just baseball. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite baseball players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. There's no shortage of ways to participate in PrizePicks. This week, I'm looking at the board. I'm going to cover all my bases. I've got Roman Anthony for more than 1 home run and Garrett Crochet for more than 8 strikeouts. It's really that easy. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the PrizePicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Ty, looking at the defense, what do you have with your first D pairing?
This is really difficult for me because I want to go in a certain number of directions here, but I'm going to stick with what feels like the most obvious. I'm going to go with Zadorov and McAvoy being the top pairing here. I just feel like this is what they envisioned when they first signed Nikita Zadorov. This is a situation that maybe allows them both to, alternate who's activating, who's being the stay-at-home guy. They can both be hammers. They can both make good decisions with the puck and surprise teams when they do activate through the neutral zone. So I'm going to go with that. I think that's probably, you got McAvoy coming off a major injury, right? And Same with your best left shot D. I don't know if you want to put those guys together out of the gate. So I'm going to say with Zadorov and McAvoy is my top pairing out of the gate.
Yeah, I was tempted to do the super loaded top pairing of Lindholm and McAvoy, but I feel like you're just spreading yourself way too thin further down the group. I do like Zadorov and McAvoy. I'm going to go a little bit of a risk here, but I'm going to go with McAvoy with Lohrei, just because it's more of the fact that I don't really know where to put Lohrei elsewhere, because like him with Peak was not good. It's been actually very, very bad. You look at the numbers. I have him up here. Lohrei and Peak, 596 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time together over the last 2 years. Bruins have been out-attempted 644 to 523. Yikes. And also been outscored 34 to 21. Not great. And yeah. I think also you look at like how well Zadorov and Jokiharju have done over this past year. Again, small sample size, but seems like they gel pretty well. I think it's almost like by default, I've got Lohrei with McAvoy. Like, I don't feel great about it because I think there's a lot of risk involved with Lohrei and just how much, he can take a step forward defensively, because you need that top pair to be humming along. You need him to move the puck with authority, not put McAvoy in tough spots either. But I feel like that's probably the most logical place for right now, at least with what my D pairing is.
Totally fair. It's totally fair. I agree with you that like I would like to put Lindholm with McAvoy. I think that is your best option. But I do think like both guys got to get their feet wet, right? And both guys got to sort of get back to, feeling good about their game before you do that, right? And that's, I always think about how teams will stack in the third period, right? Like you watch the Penguins during their heyday, and if they needed something, they'd put Gino and Crosby together in the third period. Draisaitl and McDavid, obviously, in Edmonton. Like, I like the idea of stacking that in the third period, right? You don't have to do it for 25 minutes, but if you can overwhelm a team in the third period and have them play 9 minutes of a 20-minute period, it's like, all right, I like this. Like, this might break a dam, And so, yeah, I don't love what I'm doing here. Like,
I don't feel that great about this decor as a whole. There's just a lot of things where I'm like, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think your top pairing is more likely, right? And it comes back to what you hope. You hope that McAvoy is now good enough to babysit and to elevate a player's ceiling, much like Chara did. Chara in his heyday was helping bring Johnny Boychuk along, and then Johnny Boychuk became a top 4 defenseman. The later stages of Chara, he was helped bringing along Kevin Miller and Zach Trotman and guys that you'd be like, who's this guy? But like he could hang with Chara, right? And so that could be the challenge now for a guy like McAvoy. I just don't know if it's out of the gate after missing, 35 games, whatever it was a year ago. And so that's where I love the idea. I think that's going to be the more likely pairing. It's just, do they want to do that out of the gate? That's what I'd be curious about.
Yeah. So my second pair, I got Lindholm with Peak. I think it's honestly just more of a default thing than anything. I really don't know how much I've seen of Peak and Lindholm together. There's obviously question marks of just Lindholm and how that knee is going to be. I think when you look at guys who are going to decide or factor into how strong this team's going to be, you got that top line, you got like what a guy like Middlestat could do. And I think Lindholm on the back end is going to be critical. And so I think kind of more by default, also because I just like Zadorov and Jokiharju together, that is kind of just my de facto second pair. And you just hope that Lindholm is able to regain what he was before that knee injury, because that first 6 weeks of the year last year before he went down, he was arguably probably their most impactful skater, I would say.
Yes. I would agree. The second pairing. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you could. I was trying to find some numbers, but now my computer's just playing audio.
You got Wayne Knight just shutting down your.
I do. You got Matt Dolph at the opposite. Please, with a candy cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Alex Barth gets eaten by a velociraptor. I've already written this whole screenplay. It's great.
I buy in.
It's Jurassic World 98,000 Sports Up Edition. I am gonna go with Lindholm and Peak as well. And really, I'm doing this because I was trying to find these numbers and I couldn't. They had a good game against, I think it was Tampa. Like I don't know if it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, that had to be because it was Lindholm was walking around and playing. And I thought they had a good game. And so I kind of want to go back to that, right? And, I think that's going to free up Lindholm to do more offensive-minded, thinking, plays, activation, all of that. And that's when he's at his best, right? Like, talking to him after the 23-24 season, like he acknowledged, like it's tougher when you're getting a lot of D zone run, right? And you're not playing in the offensive zone a lot. And he kind of, he wouldn't outright say it. Like he likes being a complete defenseman. So like he didn't mind it, but you could tell like he wants a bit more rope to make plays offensively. And I think that if you have a strong safety net behind him and Andrew Peeke, like I think that gives him that opportunity. So I'd want to explore it. Again, in case you can't tell, I'm not overly in love with any of my pairings right now. Like I'm very much in the discovery of a new defensive system and new defensive structure that I got to see how it all plays out. But I want to get Lindholm playing a bit more offensively, and I feel like putting him opposite a stay-at-home guy like Peeke, who doesn't feel comfortable shooting the puck and making those kind of plays. I think that's the way to do it out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then my third D pair, again, by default, but if you're just looking at anything, kind of the same mindset as like the top line playing well last year, I think Zadorov, who I think kind of played well down the stretch anyway, but him and Jokiharju seemed like they gelled pretty well. 273 minutes. Yeah, 273 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time last year. Outscored opponents 12-5. Kind of Jokiharju kind of reminds me a little bit of like when he's found the right partner. It's kind of like when Grizzly is in a good spot where he's like, doesn't make any flashy plays, gets the puck, moves it, gets out of the way. Mm-hmm. And I think if you got maybe more of a puck dominant defenseman or a guy that's maybe more dynamic, like a Zadorov or like McAvoy, when you make that comparison, I think it ends up working out pretty well. So again, not in love with any of these D pairs, but at least that's one where you have some evidence over 270 minutes of like, that could work. So that's my third pairing.
Yeah, and by default, my third pairing is Mason Lohrei and Henri Jokiharju. I think Jokiharju, as you alluded to, kind of steady Eddie back there. Like he's going to make the right plays. He's got good timing. He's very fluid. I think he's a safe defenseman in terms of like his risk versus reward and how he weighs that. And so I think if that's your third pairing, you can kind of augment how they're utilized so that they're not getting hemmed in their own zone. Whereas I think, if you keep Peeke with Lohrei, like, well, you want to put Peeke in the defensive zone. So you're going to have to put Lohrei in the defensive zone. And so I feel like Jokiharju allows them to sort of really craft, how that pairing is put out there and putting them in advantageous situations. And so I think that that's where I would go for that third pairing.
Yeah, I agree. I still don't feel that great with these deep pairs, but that's what they have. So there's still feels like they're still missing a defenseman or two, but that is a podcast for another day, I would say, Ty.
Rasmus Anderson watch begins.
I know. It would make a whole lot of sense. We'll move on to the goalies now, but before we do, just want to once again shout out the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel. We have daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins with Evan Marinofski when he's not doing the wave at Fenway, Pucks with Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season, so please follow along over on YouTube and wherever you get your hockey podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. And also shout out to the rest of our CLNS Media Network channels, whether it's Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access. They have you covered every step of the way, whether it's Patriots going to the preseason games now, Celtics. Kind of like the Bruins don't have a whole lot going on, but like, man, the Celtics All Access team has pretty much daily content out going into another Celtics season. So please follow along with all of our different channels over on the CLNS Media Network. Ty, I think...
Shout out, by the way, to Bobby Manning, who does a great job covering the Boston Celtics. I mean, the Celtics beat. I firmly believe this, right? That like certain beats at certain points in our history have like a really impressive young group of writers that are like, you're like, man, they're good. The Celtics beat right now feels like that beat, in my opinion.
Feels like there's like five or six people who like they are at everything, and it's like, again, a little word of wisdom to anyone who wants to get into sports journalism. People notice when you show up at these things, even from afar. Absolutely. So, no, Bobby, Noah, there's a whole bunch of young Celtics writers who are putting in like work every single day. So definitely shout all them out. They're doing all a great job.
Absolutely.
Ty, I think for the goalies, we all agree who the number one goalie is going to be. You hope he's a little bit better than he was last year. But beyond Jeremy Swayman, who's your backup?
My backup is Michael DiPietro.
Ooh.
Yeah, I just feel like if you try to waive Michael DiPietro out of training camp, I am telling you right now on August 8th, the Edmonton Oilers will claim him. They will claim him. I'm telling you right now. You know who's probably not going to get claimed out of training camp? Jonas Korpisalo. And, you're going to save some money by doing that, which is going to allow you, I think you could regardless, but it's going to allow you to bank away daily cap space. You're probably going to carry 3 healthy scratches up front, or I'm sorry, just on skater wise, because you don't want to lose Husadinov. You don't want to lose Beecher for nothing if you can help it. So I feel like, this is a money-saving move, similar to Nick Foligno, perhaps, opening night, in 2023, or 2022, sorry. I just feel like the numbers game and the math, it makes the most sense to try to waive Korpisalo. And if someone takes him, cool, the contract's off your hands, but I don't know if anyone's going to claim him at $3 million. And so I would save you free up the, 1.8 and change basically, by doing that. And that's what I would do. Again, this is a year where you got to explore. You got to find out what you have. And I think, a player coming off the AHL Vezina, essentially, and being an AHL first-team all-star goaltender, I want to see if that guy can play. And so I'm going to do that out of the gate because I think that math-wise, you owe it to yourself to not, risk losing him to waivers after investing all this time into developing him.
Yeah. My original, when I wrote this story for BDC, I had Korpisalo because I feel like I just went with the curmudgeon-y, this is already what's going to happen. I've just, again, have been beaten down by so many training camp battles and stuff like that ended up not being anything. Even look at Brendan Bussey last year. And again, I think a lot of it falls on DiPietro if he can really stand out during camp and make the decision that much tougher for the Bruins, then you like where he's going to be at. I think I'm going to switch though and go with DiPietro off of what you said in terms of just the choose your own adventure, book, right? Of all right, well, if you waive DiPietro, he's gone. If you waive Korpisalo, he's still going to be here. Right. And if that is someone's getting waived, barring a trade or anything like that. So if you're just looking at asset management, you'd rather keep the younger guy up here who is still going to be here if he's on the roster as opposed to something else. So again, I think a lot of it comes down to how DiPietro does. If he struggles or Korpisalo struggles, then I feel like it's pretty cut and dry. But if it is close, I'm bracing for Korpisalo, but I feel like for the Bruins now, we have to figure out, one, what you have in the younger players, and two, what scenario is going to be where you're going to have both guys in the system still. It's probably by keeping DiPietro up and Korpisalo down in Providence.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge too that last preseason, Korpisalo was nails. He had a 936. He had a high danger save percentage. I think was almost perfect. I want to say he stopped all but one high danger chance. And so, and you compare that, Bussey was a 900. And so you're all right, well, if you lose him, he lost the gig, whatever. And so you have to account for that, as you said. If DiPietro has an 875, you're oh, you didn't rise to the challenge. But I feel like this decision might be more financial and circumstantial than just raw data, right? And so if you want to if you play the odds and you say, okay, no one's going to grab Korpisalo because he makes too much money for too many years, right? And you waive him, he goes unclaimed. You give DiPietro 5 starts in October, November, the first 5 weeks of the season. You're going to kind of have a feeling as to how good of a goaltender he is, right? If he's overwhelmed, not ready for it, and you're like, oh shit, we need to get the actual backup here. You're going to be able to do that, right? And you may be able to do what you're talking about, right? Where if he starts out the year 0-2-2 with an 890, is he getting claimed? I don't know. But that's probably the best way to have both guys in your system if you want to do it that way. And then, then you see what happens. But it was, you do the math, right? If you trade Korpisalo at half retained, you're saving a little bit more than you would by just burying him in the minors, right? There's less dead cap, I think, on your books. I'd have to do the math, which is not great doing that live on air. But I just feel like financial and circumstances are going to determine what they do here, and that's why I'm going DPH route.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I just think the asset management makes the most sense. So that's our lineup. It's probably going to be very wrong once we get to October 8th, but that's what we have right now, at least. So this was a fun exercise, Ty. Before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Well, you can hear me on the airwaves this Sunday, August 10th.
Yes.
10th? Poplinski? Yeah.
Yes.
You'll hear me there 2 to 5 p.m., I believe. I got to double check on that. Oh, my God. I'm a mess right now. Myself and Matt Dolph, the Sports Hub Underground, is going above ground. So we got a pool now. So you can hang out with us. We'll be doing that. Also, 95thesportshub.com, the Sports Hub Underground podcast as well. So that's where you can find me. How about yourself? Besides Gillette, because have fun with that, buddy.
I'm already looking at the traffic reports. It is dour. You can read my stuff over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season. You can also follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, at Conor Ryan _93. This was episode 351 of Poke the Bear. Again, shout out to the CLNS Media Network. Please subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access, all that stuff to get regular content for all your Boston sports teams. And also, once again, shout out to PrizePicks, North America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download today and use code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. Again, episode 351 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. You fans have a great rest of your week.